Serverless with OpenWhisk, a hands-on workshop with Upkar leader.
So before I get started, I want to share a couple of links with everybody. So like I said, this is a workshop. I am hoping everybody follows along. So while I'm talking, if everybody could please sign up for IBM Cloud. We will look at OpenWhisk, which, like I said, it is an open source distributed serverless platform, but we'll use the hosted version of OpenWhisk, which is hosted on IBM Cloud and called IBM Cloud Functions. So, to deploy your functions, you can develop locally, it's great, but to deploy it on cloud, use this link to sign up, please. And essentially, it'll ask you for your first name, last name, email, send you an email to activate your account, and then then you're good to go. The other two bits here, the first one is the CLI. Actually, maybe easier if I just put this, the slides link in the comment section. All right, so you'll find all of the links there. The IBM Cloud CLI is it's a terminal or a command line interface to work with everything on IBM Cloud, including OpenWhisk or IBM Cloud Functions. And essentially, if I bring up my terminal, once you install it, you can run it using the IBM Cloud command. And okay, I did make the font bigger. So hopefully this is visible to everybody. All right, so this is what you get when you install the IBM Cloud CLI. You can work with the different services on IBM Cloud. For us today, we'll work with IBM Cloud Functions. And for that, you need one more plugin on top of the CLI, which is you can find in this link here. All right, so once you install IBM Cloud, you log in using this command, and then you can install the Cloud Functions plugin, which is this little command here. And if you do that, then I'm now able to say IBM Cloud FN. That's the functions plugin, and now I can work with all of the OpenWhisk actions, we call them, or functions on IBM Cloud. All right, so hopefully that's clear. Let's go back to the presentation. That's it. There's a sign up for IBM Cloud using this link, please, and then install the IBM Cloud CLI as well as the functions plugin, and you'll be all good to go to follow along. So I'll take 5 minutes to do a quick intro. In the meanwhile, please take these 2 steps. Finally, when you're good to go, this is the link to the workshop. What I've done is I've kept it pretty introductory material. If you're a beginner to serverless, if you're a beginner to IBM Cloud, then this is a perfect workshop to join. But just so that our more experienced friends do not get bored, I do have a more advanced set of workshops in a different link, which is at the bottom. The smaller link here is the more advanced or intermediate workshop, and that has a set of, a set of 7 different exercises for you to go through. Most of them are in JavaScript. There is one in Swift. Today we will work with Python and JavaScript. So that's one of the cool things with serverless is you get to play around, you get to work with different languages. OpenWhisk supports a lot of these languages out of the box, but also you can use a container or a Docker image if you don't see a language here that you want to use, you can provide a Docker image. And as long as your application, whatever language you write it in, works in Docker, you should be able to use that on IBM Cloud with OpenWhisk. All right, so hopefully everybody's clear about all the links. My email is down here too. Can you please paste the GitHub link? Yes. So this is the first workshop. As Brian said, we have 2 hours, so yes, I can take my time and paste stuff here. So this is the intro workshop. And let me get the other one too. But if you go to the slides, you should, again, these slides are open. This is the intermediate workshop. So Rajiv, I pasted the links. All right, and so just for, I guess, show of hands, how many folks have worked with serverless before versus you're pretty new or to the whole concept and to OpenWhisk and IBM Cloud Functions. If you can put something in the comment section, that'll help out. I'll give you a minute. I also see the number of people are going up as well, which is nice. So if you're just joining us, I'm just sharing a couple of links. You can download some tools, and then we can all go through some exercises on serverless. Okay, beginner, pretty new. Okay. Perfect. See a lot of beginners. So that's the first workshop link. And like I said, if you're experienced, fear not, you will not get bored. I have a more intermediate link that you can follow along. By the way, thank you so much for spending 2 hours with me today. Okay. So while you're installing, again, while you're signing up for IBM Cloud, which shouldn't take too long, and while you are installing the tools, I will go through a bunch of slides. And before I do that, give me 1 second, please. I need to make sure everybody's able to sign up. So I have 2 monitors here. That's why you're not able to see what I'm doing right now. But again, give me 1 second. Just want to make sure nobody gets stuck and signing up. So I need to do one thing here. Almost there. We have this thing called whitelisting, which essentially, it's a terrible name, but essentially it lets me allow signups to a certain page or a certain URL for IBM Cloud. And that's just so that, it doesn't think there is some sort of attack going on when a lot of people try to register. Okay, so that's done. We are good to go. Okay, and if you are having some problems registering for IBM Cloud, please let me know. All right, so if you weren't here last time, this is the first slide that we started off with last time. And I thought this is funny. There is no serverless, it's just somebody else's container. Pratik, thank you for your question. We'll get to that. So if you're brand new to serverless, it essentially means servers are abstracted away from you as developers, right? So this instead of coming up with my own definition, I kind of stole one from this link at the bottom here. It's a white paper by Cloud Native Computing Foundation, CNCF. Serverless is a very small part of this big concept of cloud native. And as it says here, serverless computing essentially refers to the concept of building and running applications that do not require active server management by you as a developer. So servers are still there behind the scenes, but a lot of things that you would previously have to do with servers, including provisioning new servers, maintaining servers, doing OS updates, patching, scaling, a lot of those things are abstracted away from you as developers, and you focus on building quality code, quality applications. Some of the use cases we talked about last time, again, I'll touch on this briefly. We won't go into as much detail as we went into last time. But I've seen a couple of use cases. So I've seen folks build APIs. That could be some sort of, for example, REST APIs or endpoints using serverless functions. A lot of serverless platforms come with a API gateway. So what you do is you develop your function, or you develop your, let's say you're doing a CRUD application, you have a resource, you need to provide endpoints for creating, deleting, updating the resource. And so you would develop each one of those as a function probably, and then put everything behind an API gateway. And a cool side effect of that is it gives you HTTP level scaling. So if a lot of people are using the post endpoint versus the delete endpoint, you get charged as a developer, as a client, you get charged for the endpoints that are being used more, right? Versus developing the whole thing as developing your code application or endpoints as an Express.js app or a Flask or a Django app, in which case, generally, you don't tend to get that scaling on an HTTP word level. I'm not saying it's a good thing or it's a bad thing. It's a sort of side effect of doing it this way. The second use case is using serverless functions as backend services. So the use case here, specifically if you look on the right, is somebody loading a set of images to a database, which then triggers a function, and the function that then processes that picture. A real world example could be when you send in a picture of a check to your bank app, right? You could have a serverless function running as a service in the backend that is essentially triggered when the picture is uploaded, and then it uses an OCR library perhaps to read the account number, the name, the amount, and then maybe calls some of the other systems to process the transaction. That's a simple example. When I as part of my job, I also mentor at hackathons and workshops. And a lot of times we go to universities, and the first question is that a team has is what kind of framework to use. And generally, people have different languages that they are familiar with. And with something like OpenWhisk or other serverless platforms, it lets you program. You can build an application in multiple languages, so to speak, where each functionality or a feature or a backend service could be written in a different language. So it comes in handy that way. And the last category of use case is event-driven programming. So that's where your application is reacting to events happening external to the system, perhaps. An example that I gave just now was the banking app, where the OCR service, the transaction service is being called once the image is uploaded to a database. In this case, the picture is showing a stream of events coming into a message hub. In this picture, the second icon is for Kafka, which is an open source message hub. And then when your function may get triggered if a certain kind of message comes in, if a message comes into a certain queue perhaps, or has a certain ID. And then in this case, the function is processing that message and then storing the result in a database. So hopefully that made sense. Any questions on this bit? Again, all of these things, these three different use cases, can be done on a traditional server full, I guess, application or platform. This is just one way of doing it, right? So I don't think of serverless as replacing a lot of things that we were doing before. In some ways, it's easy to get started with serverless, but it doesn't mean it's any easier to maintain your application. And also you still have to do a lot of things to write good quality code. For example, unit testing is not going away, or any kind of testing for that matter is not going away. You still need a solid CI/CD pipeline to make sure you put out code, or you don't put out commit changes that break code, production level code. And so this is not a bulletproof sort of way of doing things. It's different though, and we'll look at how it is different today. All right, so if you were signing up for Albion Cloud to do the workshop with us today, can you please put a note in the comment saying you're done, or you are doing it, or you're planning to, or you're not planning to do it, but you'll list along today. I just want to get a feel of how many people are actually doing the workshop today. Or Brian, if we could, I don't know if you've done polling before on Crowdcast, but if we could put out a poll saying signed up or signing up, or just listening mode.
Okay, doing that now.
Thank you very much. Okay, so as you can probably tell, if you're writing small functions that focus on doing one particular thing and do it really fast, then, okay, Doing it, setup, CLI installs, perfect. A lot of people are doing it, great. Then serverless may be something to look at. If you are not sure of how many people are going to use your application or what the usage might look like, and you want to be prepared for perhaps spikes in usage, unpredictability, then again, serverless scales very well. So it might be a good thing to look at. By design, a lot of these serverless platforms are stateless. So they're the whole concept of maintaining a session or a cookie, you have to take care of that yourself in between making calls to the functions or actions. So that's just a property or by design effect of serverless. Okay, here's a simple application. This is dummy made up application, but if you think of a conference app, right? So if you're doing, now we are having a lot of online conferences, half-day conferences, and you know, the concept of week-long conferences because of this pandemic, I don't know how that's going to change, but there's definitely new ways of doing things now. I'm sure a lot of people can agree with that. But assuming there's this conference that people are going to from Monday to Thursday, you can imagine the demand goes up throughout the day and then goes, you know, there's probably touches a peak at some point in the morning when people are looking at the schedule, getting ready to go to the conference, and then it goes down during the day to the evening when people are going home. And then throughout the week also it goes down. And the whole idea of serverless, if you had your app built up as a set of functions or services or endpoints running on serverless, then you know, you pay for the peaks and the you know, the little valleys as per usage. And so that's the idea of behind this picture, that it's predictable that the demand will go up and down. You don't know how big the peaks are going to be, and you don't know when they're going to happen. Okay. Thank you, David, for answering, for helping out in the comment section. And some of you are having issues authenticating the CLI with IBM Cloud because you have a federated ID. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. The other way, if you're doing federated ID, would be to, well, actually, that's signing in. Thank you. This is great. I installed the CLI asking me to restart my machine. Oh, wow. I did not realize it would ask you for a restart. Let me make sure I have the right link for the CLI. So there are two versions of the CLI. The first, ooh, did I give you the long link? Let's see. I think this is the right one. So this should be the right one. If you go to the other one, it has you install Docker and a whole bunch of other things that we don't need today for our workshop. I did not realize that it would ask you to restart your machine, so I'm sorry for that. Okay, but I'm glad you're back. All right, so let's go back here. Okay, so we are almost ready to start our workshop then. This is how a function or an action, we call them, looks in OpenWhisk / IBM Cloud Functions. This is a JavaScript action. So this is my piece of code that goes and sits on cloud, ready to be triggered and fired and scaled as demand arises. So in this case, three things we need to know, or you need to know, in order to create what I call a valid function on IBM Cloud and OpenWhisk. So the first one is there has to be a main method. There has to be a method, an entry point. In this case, I'm calling it main. I can call it something else as well, but if I leave it main, then I don't have to tell OpenWhisk or tell IBM Cloud Functions what it is. By default, it uses main as the entry point. That's number one. Number two is that you have to pass in an object in case of JavaScript as an input parameter. And the third thing, you have to return an object out. Okay, so as long as you're doing these three things, you have a valid OpenWhisk / IBM Cloud Functions function or action. And then there are a number of ways to run this now. So one way to run it would be using the CLI, excuse me. In the screenshots here, I have the CLI as Whisk, WSK. And if you have installed the IBM Cloud CLI, you just replace that with IBM Cloud FN. it does the same thing. And to prove that, if I go back to the terminal, if you've already installed this, try this out. Say IBM Cloud space FN and hit enter. You would see that the first thing it says is usage WSK. So it's using the open source Whisk CLI under the hood. By using IBM Cloud FN instead of WSK, it gives us a little bit more, makes it convenient for us or easy for us to work with other IBM services as well. So that's the reason to be using that. Everything we do today, you could also do with this Whisk CLI. Okay. Let's clear out. Let me go back here. All right, so this is to create a function. You can use the CLI, and then I'll read it out like I'm reading out the command to explain how this works. So essentially, I'm saying, hey CLI, I want to work with an action. I want to create an action. Let's call it hello.js. Here's the source file, which is index.js. And let's use Node.js 10 runtime in order to run this function, this JavaScript file. If you don't provide the -- kind flag, it defaults to whatever the default runtime is. In our case, it's Node.js 10. It used to be an earlier version. So the defaults, of course, it keeps up with whatever the latest stable version of Node.js is. And then in order to list all of my actions, again, I go to the CLI and say Whisk, which is the tool we're using, action list. Okay, and just to show you how that works, if I say IBM Cloud FN, which again is doing what Whisk is doing, and I say action list, it'll list me all of the actions inside on my IBM Cloud account. Okay, so these are all the actions that I have. But you're probably not at this point right now because you probably haven't logged into IBM Cloud. So I'll show you how to do that as well. Let me go see if there are any questions real quick. IBM Cloud FN failed. FN is not a registered command. If that happens, David is saying, see IBM Cloud help. Okay, I need a restart. Yeah, I did not realize it asks you to restart, but then I haven't installed the CLI lately. I installed it a while ago. So Pratik, please restart. Come back and join us. And yes, Michael, good point. IBM Cloud FN action list. It's saying in org space must be specified. IBM Cloud target. Okay, so I kind of skipped a couple of steps. So let me do this. Now that some of you have the CLI installed, let me go to the command line and we'll all do it together. Okay, so give me 1 second. I also have a couple of slides here that explain some things you're running into. Let me see if I still have that. Okay, I do. So we'll take these two and we'll put it all the way up front. Yes, and some of you are getting that message. We will fix that really quickly. All right, so let me put this up front here. Okay, clear selection, and then done. Okay, so what this is, now if you refresh the slides, you should get these two screens. Okay, so the first one tells you how to log into IBM Cloud using the CLI. And this is what you do. You say IBM Cloud login. And the second one tells you to do exactly what you're saying in the comment. You have to target Cloud Foundry as your workspace when working in IBM Cloud. You just have to do these two things. So I'll do it here with you. So let me log out of whatever account I'm using right now. So I've logged out. And now I'll say IBM Cloud login. It's asking me for my email. So let me give it a email and give it a password. Okay, so if everybody can do this, please, IBM Cloud login. If you have a federated account, then you just add. So it's asking me if I want to update. There may be potential breaking changes. No, I don't want to update at this time. Okay, so all I've done so far is IBM Cloud login, given it my email and my password. If you have a federated account, then you can do IBM Cloud Login --SSO, and this will open a browser, give you a code. You come back and enter the code here. Okay, so I'm not going to do that because I already logged in. So once you've done that, the second thing, as it's asking you to do here, and I'm sorry, it's yellow on white, which is not very legible, but it's asking you to do this command, IBM Cloud Target space --CF. So let's do that, IBM Cloud Target --CF. As soon as I do that, it will fill out my org, it'll fill out my space. So now you see here, I have a space, I have an org, and everything is looking better. Okay. As David said, if you're still confused, you can go to, or if this is not working, you can check the help out. It has some more, it tells you what options you have, what things you can do with the IBM Cloud CLI. Okay. So anyways, did that help? Are you able to log in, and are you able to now do IBM Cloud FN action list? Let me know. Are you able to do that? I think Jose, you got that message. Michael, you got that message. Let me know if you're able to do this now. I also see a question, so I'm going to. I love this terminal. Which app is this? So this is iTerm, and then it's got a different shell attached on it. It's got this one. Yeah, I really like it as well. I'll paste this. And so Pratik is asking, what does IBM Cloud Target CF do? So as you saw, it's assigning a. Let me go back. It's assigning a. Oops, can't go back. IBM Cloud Target. It assigns me the right org and the right workspace. There are other. Right here, it's assigning me the right org in the space for me, which wasn't said before. So that's one of the things it does. Okay. I did start CF, but I'm still not associated with an org. Michael, can you? So in this case, let me see. Another way to do that would be go to this page here, see this one here. Actually, wait, let me log in. Let me log in, because it pre-fills a lot of this for you in the help on the help site. Oh, no orgs are found. It might be the case that did you just sign up for IBM Cloud? So give it like a minute or two to create an org for you. But you see on top here, it's created that org for me. And then try again, please. Or you can try IBM Cloud space logout and then IBM Cloud space login. Come back into it. Yeah, it usually takes a second to create the org. So if you do it right after creating your account, it might take a minute. Also, go to, if you go back to this URL, let me go back here. If you go back to the sign up URL, and then there is a login button on top. There's this login button. If you see right on top here is a login button. Oops, that doesn't help, huh? So on top right, there's a login button. Log in there, and then David is saying I've been signed up for over 2 years. Oh, still no org found? That's interesting. David, try logging into the IBM Cloud thing on top here. It should take you to your dashboard, and you can see what the org is there, and we can set it manually. Okay, what about everybody else? Is anybody able to get to this point where you can do the target --CF and it finds the correct org for you? Is anybody able to get there? Let's see. Workshops are always interesting. There's always some problems, but we'll get through it. Okay, it's easier to see with the black background. David, are you able to get to the dashboard using the UI here? Pratik will be back after a restart, that's fine. And then Michael, were you able to also come into the UI? Michael says I am, okay. In that case, let's see. There is a doc support manage. That's the other CLI we could have used. Pratik, thank you. It fails the CF API endpoint, no org. Okay. So there's a way to set the org, but I was hoping the CLI would do it for you automatically. Let's go back to this one here. Let me refresh this page. Now that I'm logged in, plugins manually, extending plugins, so the Docker container, installing, creating, deploying apps. Let's see, a quick reference. Let me go here. Nope. Okay, give me 1 second, everybody. I know there is one page that fills out everything for you. I'm trying to get to that page. So that'll make it a lot easier for everybody. I haven't had this problem before. Let me increase this. So this is the shell provided within IBM Cloud. It's pretty neat. So IBM Cloud target -- Cloud Foundry. Let's see. Perhaps because I have multiple orgs, that is very possible. I can execute list, get it. Okay, Jose, thank you for confirming. If you're really not able to do the CLI stuff on your terminal, and if it's not working, that's okay. Here's another way to do this. So if you go into your, the link I gave you before and you log in, you'll come to this page. You'll come to cloud.ibm.com. Let me put that here. So you'll come to cloud.ibm.com, and then there's a little terminal thing on the top right, if you see on the top right of the screen. Click on that, it opens a shell, a cloud shell, that has all of the tooling installed that we need. Once you're inside this shell, you can do IBM Cloud target --CF and see what that gives you. Since you're logged into the right account and everything, and an org, David, I'm hoping this one will assign you the right org. Can you please try this? And then if I go IBM Cloud function action list, it should have all of my functions should come back. Okay, so these are all of my actions or functions that I've installed here. All right, please give that a try. If you're using the terminal, let's start working on some of these exercises. Pratik says, I'm logged in. Perfect. Pratik, is that CLI or the cloud? David, thank you for putting, yes. It's asking you for a region. Ooh, it's asking you for a region. Let me go back to the CLI. That is interesting. Oh, it's asking me for a region. Choose the, I choose Dallas when I sign in, if nothing's assigned to me. I think it gives you a list of 4 or 5 or 6 regions. I use Dallas, so pick something close to where you are. Or you can just pick Dallas just to keep everything simple. David says, figured it out. To create an org, okay. Yeah, Pratik, pick US South. Thank you for giving that, putting that list in the chat section. So if you see a big list and it's asking you what region to join, pick one closest to you, or you can pick US South. I picked US South. IBM Cloud FM property get should recreate that file for me. Why? That is interesting. Using the shell works, great. Thank you, Michael. The thing with the shell, let me just confirm I'm able to like access the directory. I should be able to. So if I create a file here called index.js, I should be able to use Vim or something like that to write that file. Okay, great. So if you're able to do that, oops, let me exit this. If you're able to do that, this will also work. Yes. So if the CLI is not working locally, then go to the, if it's not working in the terminal, you can definitely use the shell. David is saying IBM Cloud resource groups, target. Yeah, so you're right. There are, in this one, if I go IBM Cloud target, I can work with different things right here. I can create orgs, I can delete orgs, just set orgs, I can set target, I can target resource groups and things like that. So for example, on top here, it's saying it hasn't connected to my resource group. I can use this command to connect to the right resource group. So IBM Cloud, and I can connect to the default resource group, which in my case is the default. So so you see here, it assigned me a resource group. Similarly, you can assign the org and the space and everything here. But I was really hoping when you log in, it does that for you. I'm actually going to look for that. IBM Cloud. I'm going to look for that anyways, just in case somebody else has problems. David, if it's saying FN is not a registered command, you need to get the FN plugin. So the link to that is this one here. So I don't know if you installed this or not, but you have to do this little command. Yes, thank you, Jose. So you have to install the Cloud Functions plugin. So this is what I was saying. So if I come back, I came back to the docs and I'm logged in. In that case, look at the IBM Cloud login command here. So it's slightly bigger, but you can try this. And this is targeting the dev space for you, and it's targeting this org for you automatically. Now, of course, this is my org. You'll have to do your email. So let me paste this as well in the chat. If somebody's still having problem, then you can try this. So this is your email. Okay, try that. If you do this, then a lot of the stuff will already be filled out for you. And then you target the namespace. So this is the help doc. So go to this. Oops, I don't mean to do that. I was pasting this. So this is the help doc link. If you go to this link and you're already signed in, then it tells you how to log in and how to target the right thing. All right, so I'm going to keep going here. I think a lot of folks are now able to at least get the CLI working. And again, if not, use this Cloud Shell to get it working on the cloud. It's just that it doesn't give you, you can't use your favorite editor and things like that. You have to use VI. Maybe that's your favorite editor. You never know. In which case, everything's fine. Okay, so I still have one problem here. FN. Let me see. If I do this, IBM Cloud FN property, then I should be able to. Okay, set, unset. Okay, so let me try this. IBM Cloud FN property unset, and then IBM Cloud FN property get. Let me. Oops. IBM. I misspelled it. IBM Cloud FN property get. It gets the thing back for me. But for some reason, it's still getting me this namespace, which I'm not happy about. So let me remove that. Sorry, folks, I'm going to try it one more time. Okay, let's try it one more time. IBM Cloud IBM Cloud log out, IBM Cloud log in. Let's actually make use of the documentation. It's here. So I'll copy that and let's put that in. Email is this. And then password. Using region 7 instead of 8 made it work locally. Okay, thank you, Michael. What was 7? What was 8? Let's go back. Okay, US South made it work. Okay. So I'm going to pick US South as well. So as you can see, it's logging me into everything. And it's already set most of the things. Again, I'll set the group as well. So, all right, so everything is set. Now let's see. I already, let's see, IBM Cloud FN action list. Yeah, there might be a bug here where my the function plugin is not picking up the right account. It's picking up my us.ibm.com account, whereas I've logged in as my Gmail account. As you all can see, this seems a little bit buggy to me. Function, let's see, IBM Cloud function. What else can I do here? I can work with action, activation. I can work with packages. We haven't talked about some of this, so I'll go back to the slides and make sure everybody understands all of this before we move on. Work with IBM Cloud FN namespace. Let's see what comes back. Yeah, that's the only namespace I have. Cloud FN property. Cloud FN list. Okay, yeah, it's still taking me back to the IBM.com account. So that's okay. That's okay. I can work with that. But hopefully everybody else is seeing their own accounts there. Okay, so let me go back and explain a little bit more about the whole, what these different things are. What are actions? What are triggers? What are functions? So let's go back to the slides. And let me grab this and this. Actually, okay, let's just do it this way. All right, so we had a quick introduction to what serverless is, what are the different use cases, what does a JavaScript action or function looks like, and then it took us a while, but hopefully everybody's got a CLI. The CLI working now, you're able to log into your IBM account. This is, like I was saying, this is the second way you can write a JavaScript function. The first one was have an entry point, a method, called main, and then pass in an object, pass out an object, or return an object. The second way would be to return a promise. If you are doing some asynchronous things inside your function, but you want the result to come back before your function returns to the user, in that case, you can return a promise. And in this case, I'm running a long operation here, and then I'm able to either resolve or reject based on whatever my logic may happen to be. This is using promises, but you can also use async await. Whatever whatever ES level your runtime Node.js runtime supports will work, because essentially everything's running on the underlying container or runtime. Okay, and then before we get into the exercises, I quickly also want to give you a little bit more background into OpenWhisk. So OpenWhisk, it's a distributed serverless platform. It was created by IBM Research and then donated to Apache. And then some of the other companies involved from an early stage are Adobe. Their production level serverless platform, I think it's Adobe I/O, is also based on OpenWhisk. And Red Hat was also doing some interesting work with OpenWhisk for a while here. And there are some other partners, great partners involved, as you can see here. We talked about actions a little bit. Two other things we need to know for the exercises today are triggers and rules. So action is your code. That's the logic. That's the code that's running on the serverless platform. And then triggers, again, triggers are things that are waiting for an external event to happen. If something interesting happens externally, your trigger gets fired. That trigger, if it's linked to an action using a rule, then it fires the action as well. I'm also, okay, Pratik, yeah, VS Code CLI is really amazing. Okay, so what are the different kinds of actions you can write? So like I said previously, it supports a bunch of languages as shown here. The screenshot is really old, so I think they've added new ones. Also, the don't go by the version number, that might have changed as well. But in general, the point I'm trying to get across is you can use any language that you like. If you don't see one here, then you can use a Docker container. You can pass it a Docker container, a public Docker container on Docker Hub, and be able to run your code that way. What are some of the triggers that you can listen to? So you see here, the first is social events. So there are, you can listen to, for example, look at Slack. You can listen for certain messages to come into a certain Slack channel and then have the function do something. So an example that I worked on at in a hackathon was write a function that was listening into a channel, and every time, and if somebody said something rude or impolite, it uses the function used natural language processing to detect the rudeness or anger or disgust, those sentiments, and then it would tell that person to be more polite. So that's a very simple use case, but it's the trigger part of that is every time a message came in, it fired my trigger. My trigger was attached to an action using a rule, and so my action got invoked as well. The other one we looked at, data changes, is pretty common, right? So every time a new data comes into your database, you may want to process that somehow by using an action or a function. IoT is another big use case, right? So that's IoT is pretty much everywhere now. If you think of wearables as an example, you may be processing a lot of data coming from IoT devices on their serverless functions. User input is a very simple one. So think of this as somebody filling out a form or a survey, and you want to process that request and store it somewhere. You may use action for that. And like I said, rules are nothing but a linkage between your action and your trigger. Okay. I have some slides on what OpenWhisk looks like under the hood. Again, this is it uses Nginx. It uses Kafka, which is a message hub. It uses CouchDB, which is a document-based NoSQL database as its storage or persistence there. And then the invokers are essentially managing your runtimes or your containers as requests come in. The right set of invokers or invoker pool is asked to create a new container, run your code, give you the result back. But the point here I was trying to make was it leverages existing open source solutions. So the only bit that is open source but is sort of custom made is the controller, and that's the glue that puts everything together in OpenWhisk. And then on the right there is a sample. I give you a sample of what happens when you say run my action, how the different pieces come together to actually make that happen. It's completely built on open source. So if you install OpenWhisk locally on your system, you get a whole bunch of images, including your message hub, which is Kafka, your storage, API gateway, and the actual runtimes as well. So it's very open. You can go see the source code. You can install it locally as well. But again, for our workshop today, it made more sense to use a managed version of OpenWhisk, which is IBM Cloud Functions. And then I have some screenshots here showing what kind of commands you can pass in, right? So it comes with some packages, some community packages. So for example, they are under the whisk.system namespace. So if you say IBM Cloud FN package list /whisk.system, let's actually do that. So if I say IBM Cloud FN package list, And sorry, I haven't talked about packages yet, but if I go back to this screen here, you see at the bottom right, it says packages. So once you have your triggers, your actions, your rules, you can bundle all of that into a package, which you can then, that package then you can share with others. So what our open source community has done is created a whole bunch of packages for different systems, right? So if I list all of the packages under the Whisk .system namespace, then you'll see here all of these packages are pre-created and provided to you. So CloudInt is again the NoSQL database one. There's a package for Slack. To get the details of this package, I can now, I can go to the GitHub page and see what's in there. But from the command line, I can also do IBM Cloud package, IBM Cloud FN, which is same as Whisk, package get, and get will tell me what's inside. Okay, so if I do that, it outputs a JSON, and it's telling me the package name of the package is Slack. It's sitting under Whisk.system namespace, and then it has a bunch of, if I want to use it, I may have to pass in certain parameters, right? This is the Slack username, the password, any sort of webhook that you're using, and then also the name of the channel. And then there are a bunch of actions that I can use. So here are the actions, right? So this one has just one action. It's called post, right? And then post requires certain parameters, including the message I want to post, and I can use this. So this is how you can also bundle your actions and triggers and packages together and provide to other people. If I look at the CloudInt one, it's a little bit more interesting because that's a database. So if I say IBM Cloud FN package get the CloudInt one, you'll see, oops, I didn't put in get. I forgot to say get package CloudInt. It's a lot longer. There are a lot more actions. So in this case, you see the action is called read database. Action is called delete database. You can work with documents. You can work with attachments. You can query, filter. All of those things that you can do in a database are provided as OpenWhisk actions in this package. So these are some community build packages. So hopefully that's making sense. Okay, and then I have examples of what happens when you actually put in a request, but we're going to skip all of this and we're going to start coding now. All right, so let's go back. If you go back to this slide that had the first JavaScript hello world action. Okay, so this one here, let's all create this action together. So let's, there should be nothing. Oh, let me go to, let's see what's in here. Hello world, right? So let's go to hello world. So there's nothing here. This directory is completely empty. So let's create a file called index.js. Okay, so everybody please do that, and then we will start typing in this file. So open your editor, or you can use whatever you're comfortable with. I see coronavirus. Yes, we were building. We had a workshop where we were looking at some data sets for coronavirus and using pandas and Python to visualize that data set. So that's probably what you're referring to. Okay, so here's my index.js file. And again, we'll keep it simple for now. Let's write a function, call it main. It takes in some arguments. That's what I'll do for now. Okay, and then inside this function, I will check if there is an object called names and params. So if params and params.name, then I want to return a greeting saying hello to that name. So I'll return an object. Remember, that's the second thing. The output has to be an object in JavaScript. And this object will essentially say hello to params.name. And then otherwise, I just want to say hello world. Okay, so this is a really simple function. Also, I want to console.out, right? So that's a good way to see what's going on. So let me just console.out the same thing. I know I'm repeating code. It's probably not the best thing to do, but for our simple example here, it will do for now. I cannot spell today. Console.log hello world. All right, is everybody following? Please let me know if you're stuck. But here's the simple code, right? This is all I want to do. So let's make sure this runs. So in order to do that, again, just to show the code is here, we just wrote this. And now I can say IBM Cloud FN action create. So I want to create a new action, and I will call this hello world CFE. Okay, and then I need to tell it where to get the source code from. So I'll say index.js, and I'll leave the kind flag out for now because I want to use whatever default runtime is provided for JavaScript files. And hit enter. It will hopefully create that action for me pretty quick. All right, so it created an action called hello world CFE. Now, in order to run this action, I can say IBM Cloud FN action invoke. That's the second command, hello world CFE. If I just run this command without providing any additional flags, it'll give me what we call an activation ID. And now this activation ID has more information about what actually happened. So I can say IBM Cloud FN activation get and give it that activation ID that it just returned back to me. And you'll see it returns some JSON back. And one of the things I can see in here is that my code ran, the status was success with a status code of 0. And the result was an object that has a property called message, MSG, and then hello world inside there. And also there were some logs produced, and it gives me a timestamp for the log and then what happened. So I just output hello world. Okay, so this is I'm going to paste this. Let me go here, and I'm going to paste this in GitHub just in case you don't want to type, and you just want to get this from a GitHub gist. So this we called it index.js. This is the code, and create public gist. And let me paste this in Crowdcast. So here's the code we just typed in. If you want to copy paste that, and then in the comments section, I will put in the commands that I ran to create this action, right? So the first one was this one here. So IBM Cloud FN action create. And the second thing we did was to invoke. And then the third thing we did was to see what actually happened, we ran this with the correct activation ID. Activation ID from number 2. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see this. I just want to make sure it's there. All right, yeah, so you should be able to see this. So try that out, please. Let me know in the comment section once you have successfully created this very simple hello world action and then be able to invoke it. And then we'll move on to something called web actions. All right, can I have a quick show of hands for folks who have successfully deployed this on IBM Cloud? Or if you're working on it, just say working. Also, let me know if if I'm just talking to myself or if there's somebody out there actually doing this with me. I'm assuming everybody's typing away and working on this, so we'll give you 2 minutes. Oh, done, worked. Thank you. Anybody else? I see a lot of people online, so I'm sure other folks are. I'm hoping you're also working on this. Arvin, thank you. Okay, so that was our simple function. If you want to try this one out as well, you can go ahead and do that. Actually, let's do that so that way I can tell you how to update a function, right? So let's say something changed here. Now I want to return a promise. Hello world CFE is the action name, Pratik. That's the one I picked, but you can name it whatever you like. So in this case, I want to change this action to return a promise. And I'll do it the old-fashioned way, right? So return to return promise, it takes in resolve and reject, and then my body itself, I may be, yes, Pratik, that's a good point. I'll go to the UI next to show the second exercise, but yes, you can see whatever you do in the CLI, you can actually use the UI to do as well. So in this case, I do some long-running operation, and then I can do the same code. So let me take this, put all of that here, and instead of returning this, I will resolve. Okay, so if there's a name, I will resolve with this message. Otherwise, I'll reject my promise with this message. Let's format this so it looks nicer. Okay, let's see if this works. So I've changed my code. Instead of returning a simple object, I'm returning a promise. And then, inside here, I might be doing something. And based on the results, I might, resolve or reject it. Okay. So let's update our function to use this new asynchronous code. In order to do that, so again, if I show you the file here, this is our new file, right? And then if I do IBM Cloud FN action, instead of create, I'm going to use update. I'm going to update hello world CFE with this index.js file. Okay, so David is asking, can you go over the concept of promise again? So yeah, promise is a way to do asynchronous programming in JavaScript, right? So instead of if you have a blocking operation, then instead of waiting for that operation to finish, you can return a promise. And when that operation eventually finishes, depending on the result, you can, at that point, your promise gets resolved or rejected. So again, you can read up more about that. It's a way to do asynchronous programming, so you're not blocked on long-running operations inside your code. All right, so I've updated my Hello World CFE action using this new code. And again, to run it, I can say IBM Cloud FN action invoke Hello World CFE. In this case, I'll pass in a -r flag, and that just means wait for the thing to come back. So let's see what this does. Okay, so it is giving me an error. This is not a real error. So what happened was I didn't pass in a name, so my promise got rejected. To pass in a parameter, I can use the -p, and then it's a key value. So my parameter name is this, and I will pass in my own name. And if I run it this way, now my promise should be successfully resolved and not rejected, and I get the proper message out. Okay, so this is let me update the gist just in case you were following. So I'll put in, let's see if I can edit. Yep, that's great. So for a promise version, you should see something like this. Let's see how this looks. So actually, I forgot to grab this. Let me grab the whole thing. So we updated our promise, our function, and then we ran it again. Okay, that looks better. Okay, and then also, Okay, so update comment, and then I'll put in the file as well. So, oops, I did not mean to do that. Copy all of this, and let's put this here as well. Let's add a file, and we'll call this index-async.js. All right, so just has been updated with all of this stuff. If you want to go and copy that instead of typing it in. Okay, so we created a promise, or we created an action, we updated an action, and we saw how to pass these different flags from the command line. Okay, that's all well and good. How do now I give this to my colleague or to my friend or to somebody else who wants to use this function? It's my greeting function. It's not doing much, but the concept still holds, right? So in order, does the activation ID changes after update? The old activation ID does not change, Pratik. So activation ID is, it's a record of history. It's a record of something happening. That activation ID will stay the same. You'll get a new activation ID for every single activation. So if I were to run this again without the -r a couple of times, you see the activation ID is changing. I get a new activation ID every single time. And I can use the fn activation list command to list all of the activations that have happened. And then I can use the activation get command to get any one of these IDs. So if I pick this one, it'll give me the JSON file, right? So hopefully, yeah, that makes sense. Good. The other thing, okay, so we created this function. Let's share it with somebody first. So in order to do that, we can convert this function. There are two ways to do that. One is to convert this function into what we call a web action or a web function. So in order to do that, it's fairly simple. Before I do that, I want to show you one more thing. So I opened a split tab in the terminal, and I'll tail all of my activation or pull all of my activations on this side, just to show you, this is another way to sort of see what's going on. It works for like one or two actions, but this is, I don't know if anybody's ever coded or developed back in the day whenever you had to SSH into a remote server and then try and see the logs. So I remember polling logs that way. This does something very similar. I remember tailing logs. So in this case, now if I invoke a function, so if I say this again, you'll see the right-hand side get populated with what happened, right? So a function got fired, it gives me the activation ID, and then it produces the logs. So if I do the one with my name, so I'm using -r, so it'll give me the result on the left-hand side, but you'll see something come on the right-hand side. So here's my second activation that just happened. So when I'm developing, first of all, I develop locally to see, I need to get my code working locally, and then I use some sort of CI/CD to push to IBM Cloud. But this is one way to quickly see your logs and see what's going on. Okay. So the next thing I want to show is this whole concept of web action. So in order to convert our function into web action, we can use the update command. So let's use the update command, and you just say --web true. This converts the action into a web action. The internet's a little bit slow today, but now I have something called a web action, which one of the things that does is gives me a URL that I can now share with other people. To get that URL, you can say IBM Cloud function action get, right? So I want to get always gives you some sort of details or describes the action. So I want to get the details for Hello World CFE. In particular, I'm looking for the URL. So that gives me this URL. And now what I can do is I can go to a browser. And if I put that URL in and add .json at the end, this should run my action. Now this is a public action. It's not a very secure action at this point because I've just made it open to everybody or anybody to come and access. But now I'm able to get to it through a browser or through an application. It's created an endpoint for me to use the action. And then again, I can say name equals something like that. It'll give me my name back, right? Whatever I put in there. So try this. Try converting your action into a web action and see what happens. There's one more thing web action does. When you convert an action to a web action, it now behaves in a web-like fashion. And what I mean by that is, if a web action is invoked from a browser, then I now get access to certain properties, certain web properties or browser type properties in my action. And to show you how that works, let's change the code a little bit and output all of the properties or the params from my action. By the way, if you see the activation log, you can see, every time I invoke an action, it puts something out there. It's kind of cool. The command to convert something into a web action is this one here. So I'll type that in here. There you go. Okay, so here we go. We are changing our action to output all of the params. So even before we return a promise, even before we do anything, actually, let's do it here. So I will console.log params. And I forget if I have to do the stringify thing or this will just work. Let's see. Let's try this. So I'm just console.log params before I do anything else. And in this case, so will that actually, let me think. Yeah, that should work. So let's update our action again, right? And again, I'll say -- web true, but it's grabbing new code at this point. And then let's run this action. So let me clear this console on the right and let me invoke this action with my name. Okay, so it gives me hello world. And as you can see on the right-hand side here, it prints, this is my param. Let's make it a little bit clearer and let's say, so it's a little bit more clear. Who still uses print statements or console.logs to debug your programs? Unknown flag -- URL. That's interesting. Is it a web action? David, you have to first convert it to a web action, and then I can say IBM Cloud FN. Well, let me update it since I just changed it. So I update it first. Then if I go IBM Cloud FN action get, so I have to get my action, and then I want the URL. For me, it does give me the URL back. That should work. Okay, so let's run it again. So I'll clear the console, and in here I will invoke it again. And okay, this is a little bit better, right? So it says param start. This is my param that came in, and param end. Now, if I now run, let me get the URL again. If I run this action from a browser, watch what happens. Okay, so this is my, let's go here again, do a .json, and again, this time I'll give it Brian, and let's run this action. So okay, so it says hello Brian. If you look at the console now, there is a lot more going on than just my standard output from before, right? So this is from before, and now I get this whole bunch of other params that you can probably tell, so accept language, accept encoding, some sort of cookie information. It's got, I'm coming in from Firefox. It's got the agent information. It's got a whole bunch of stuff here that is more browsery or webby, I guess, than the other. So, it's the HTTP information. So that's the other thing that web action does. It gives you a URL, but also now you have access to all of these web type of parameters inside your action. Okay. So hopefully everybody's caught up now. So we've created an action, we have invoked it from command line, now we know how to convert our action to a public action. Like I said, it's not a very secure action. So to change that, what I can do is when at the time when I create or update an action, let's do a little -- help to see what's available. Let's get rid of this one. All right, so you see there's something called -- web secure, and that's how you would create a more secure action. David is saying getting 400. David, sometimes my browser is a little bit finicky. I've gotten 400 in the past. I'm not exactly sure why that happens. If you try a private or incognito thing, you might, again, if somebody has a better answer, folks who are listening, please chime in. But if one way to see if it actually works is to do a curl, right? So with the same thing. And the second way would be to use a different browser or go incognito. It's something to do with caching or something like that. I'm not sure. I don't even recall what 400 is, but try that. And then antivirus, I'm not sure, or firewall. Okay, no, I'm not sure. Pretty good guess. So update async. Just let me see. What did we make any changes? Oh, it's a bunch of console.log, but okay, let's do that. Let's do that. It's a good point. So edit and put that. Bad request. Worked in Chrome. Yeah, sometimes. So I'm using Firefox and it's working for me. So I need to sit down and figure out why that happens sometimes for some people. So when it happens next time, I'll make sure I debug a little bit more. But I'm glad it's working for you now. Okay, so I updated the gist. So let's go back here. So yeah, I was showing you if I do a help, oops, not on get, I want to do a help on create or update. Let's do an update. So you see here, I can say -- web true, or I can say -- web secure and pass it a secret. And that's now it's secured behind some sort of AP, some sort of key. So if I try that again, so update -- web -secure, and then my password was 0. I promise I've not used that anywhere else. Okay, so and now if I go to my browser and try and hit that again, it should say authentication is possible but failed, right? So now I have a little bit more secure action than before. The other thing you can do is you can put this action behind your API gateway, and then you can do a lot other things than just this. To create an API in front of my action, I can do this, -- help. Oops, I misspelled it again. So here's how you create an API. Again, I really like this CLI and the way it shows me all of the different options. So if I do API create -- help, it tells me how I can create an API. Give it a base path, which is optional. Give it an API path, verb action, API verb, and an action, right? So I can say create an API that every time somebody comes to the endpoint /greeting and sends me a get request, then call my hello world CFE action. That's the mapping that's happening from the API gateway to my action level. Okay, so we do have half an hour left. I'm glad this was 2 hours, Brian. Thank you for that. Let's do one more exercise. And this is where we will create an action that, given a URL, it'll do visual recognition on that URL. We could write a neural net to do our own visual recognition of some sort, but instead we will use a service on IBM Cloud called Visual Recognition that will do that for us. So this is the part where we now go back to our IBM Cloud account. So again, let's go back to the URL that I shared in the beginning. So this one here, and log into your account. If you're already logged in, you'll see something like this, and you can say, yeah, sure, take me to the console. Otherwise, you just log in. Okay, so I put that in the comment as well. So now I'm here. Let's create a visual recognition service. This, by the way, if you go to the labs, so if you go to the labs, this is the part 2. So let's go to the serverless lab 2, not the CLI bit, but this bit. And then there's a PDF file here which will follow. Okay, I put that in the comment as well. If you open the PDF file, it has steps on how to finish this lab. And the idea is we're creating a function that, given a URL, the function takes in a URL and gives me what all it identifies in the image as an output. It's a visual recognition function. And it uses the IBM's visual recognition service in order to do it. So let's create this visual recognition service. You can create it from the CLI, but it's a long command. It's sometimes easier to create it from IBM Cloud UI. So if you go to the catalog, which is on the top bar here, let me increase a little bit. So on top, there's the catalog thing. You go there, and then you click on this AI thing. Alternatively, you can just type in visual recognition in the search, and it should come up. So if I say visual recognition, then that's the visual recognition thing I want to create. I already have a service created, so I'm not going to create one from scratch, but I'll show you how to do it. So go to visual recognition, click on this tile. It takes you to the creation page. I already have one created, so it won't let me create another one, but it's free to use. You can do 1,000 events per month, and it resets every month. So it's essentially free forever. There's a usage limit per month. And it gives me a name for the service. You can change this if you want to. I keep everything else the same, and then click on this create button. Like I said, you can only have one instance of the free service at a time. Since I already have mine created, I am not able to create a new one. But what I can do is I can either click on this little bar. You see this little bar on the top left, and go to my resources and pick it from there. So if I come to my resources, or if I go to my resources and services, under services, I already have a visual recognition service. So I clicked on that. It should take me to the service homepage. Okay, and all I need from here is this API key and the URL. So instead of showing everybody what this API key is, I'm just going to create a new credential, which I'm going to remove once we finish this webinar. So this should create a sort of a throwaway credential for me. And if I go to the bottom, here's my API key that I need, and here's the URL that I need. Okay. Again, if you're creating a new service, it'll bring you to this page. And then on the left, it brings you to the manage page, and you have to go to the service credential tab. And so you can see my API key here. Okay. The other thing I want to do is write my code that uses the visual recognition SDK. The visual recognition SDK, if I go to getting started, let's use Python for this. And as you can see here, it's asking me to install this pip package called IBM-Watson. So if you're a JavaScript person, not a Python function, this is like doing npm install in your Node.js. So pip install IBM-Watson. Now the good thing is the runtime or the container, Python container that you can use with IBM Cloud Functions already has this installed, so you don't have to do this step. And then it gives you a little code on how to classify an image. There might be more code here, right? So how to use certain models, et cetera, et cetera. What I've done is instead of using this code, I have provided another gist that has all of this already done. So let me share this with everybody. Now, hopefully this will work. So as you can see here, this is using Watson Developer Cloud. And I think it is asking you to use, where'd it go? It's asking you to use IBM Watson, so it's a little bit different. I think they upgraded this recently, and the code I have is old, but I think it should still work. Otherwise, we'll change it. Okay, so let me paste this in the just for visual recognition function. Okay, I pasted that in the comment. This is the code we'll use, and we'll update our the API key and the URL. Okay, so in order to do this, instead of using the CLI, let's now use the IBM Cloud Functions thing. So have one tab open with these credentials, or copy paste them somewhere. I'm going to copy it and paste it just in case I move away from that page. That happens sometimes. So I pasted it here. Let me go back. And if you're anywhere in IBM Cloud, if you click on the little menu, the hamburger menu on the left, well, it's got 4 bars. It's probably, I don't know if that's still a hamburger menu. And then you go to functions on the bottom left. That takes you to IBM Cloud Functions UI, right? So under the hood, it's still OpenWhisk, nothing different. I can still use the CLI thing, but now that I'm here, we can use the UI just for this exercise. So if you go to Actions, or you can click on Start Creating. Let me go to Actions to see what's in there. And I will also paste this, IBM Cloud Functions. All right, so I have a bunch of actions here, which is fine. And I can create a new action. So let me create a new action. And I'll just use, instead of using a template, I'll just use create action button or link. There's also a concept of sequence, which is interesting. And that's how you can chain actions together and create bigger actions from a chain of actions. And then trigger, we haven't seen trigger yet, but we can look at that as well. But for now, let's create an action. I will call it, again, I'll give it a meaningful name, image recognition. Oops. So that's my action, CFE image recognition. And I'm going to use Python 3.7 and click on create. It gives me a little editor where I can type in my code. It also gives me a little bit of a starter code. So I can, at this point, click on invoke, and that invokes my action, which essentially is just returning a hello world. And for folks who are new to Python, this is, let me increase the font. Okay. Okay, if you're new to Python, this is just importing some package, and then it's our module, and then it's defining a function. Again, to be a valid IBM Cloud function in Python, I need to define, have an entry point. If it's called main, then I don't have to tell, again, OpenWhisk what it needs to be or what it is. So I've called it main. Remember, in JavaScript, you have to pass in an object and return an object. In Python, you have to pass in a dictionary and return a dictionary. And this is a valid action then in Python. If I say invoke with parameters, or actually just, yeah, so invoke with parameters, I can give it a name, right, as before. Now, I'm not using this anywhere in the code, but I could. Ooh, now we're writing some Python and my brain is all wired up with JavaScript. How do you do this? Can somebody help? If name in dictionary, then if name is in dictionary, then I want to say hello to the name. So let me do it this way. Dict name. I think that should work. That seems like valid Python, but let's test it out. So I'm going to invoke it, and I should get hello world. Ooh, name is not defined. Oh yes, so I have to say, this is, of course, it's a string, it's not a variable. So let's run it again. Invoke it. I get hello Upkar letter because there is a name. If I remove that, if I remove this, apply. So now I don't have any parameters. I should get a simple hello world, right? So hello world versus hello name. So this is my very simple, and I'm going to create this as a new thing here, just in case you want to change yours. Add file, hello.py, and update my gist. All right, so we've got JavaScript, we've got a little bit of Python. And what I'll do now is I'll replace this code with the visual recognition gist. So that is here. So let's open this and copy this whole thing and paste it. And then we'll go through the code real quick. So let's replace it with this. And all this is doing is it's using the visual recognition package or visual recognition class from Watson Developer Cloud package, our module. And then inside my main, I set up my API key, set up some sort of versioning that it needs. I create a new instance of visual recognition with this version and the API key. And then given an image URL in my params, I am using the classify method to see what's inside that image. And then I'm just going through all of the classes that come back and then just printing. So it goes to my logs to see what's inside. Okay. If I save it, if I run it, it's going to fail because I haven't given it my API key and I have not given it the image URL. But let's see it fail. The first time you run a function, it takes a couple of seconds because it has to create a fresh container, put your code in, and then run it. So here's it, like we predicted, it's failing because there's no API key. So remember that the credentials we pasted in the other file. So I'm going to grab that real quick. So here's my API key. Now API key, of course, I don't want to hard code it inside my code. So I'm going to pass in as a parameter. And I'm calling it API key with capital K, camel case. So let's do that here. So API key, and this is my API key. Okay, does it need it needs something called image URL. So we'll pass that in. It doesn't even need the SDK doesn't need my URL. I was thinking it needs this URL, but it doesn't, so that's good. Now we have to give it an image. So let's do, let's search for some, let's get this one. Let's get this one, this one's cute. Okay. I know I'm just randomly picking an image without looking at the licensing and all of that, but just for a demo, it should be fine. But I am aware of that. So let's give it image URL, and this is where my image is coming from. And let's see if I call it image URL, so that was not going to work. So this is like this. All right, so let's invoke it now and see what happens. So it should use the visual recognition service and give me some results back. Okay, it did. So it identified golden retrievers in that picture. Now, all of this is coming back with some sort of confidence as well. So to see that, I don't think I output that here. Classes for the. Let me try and print the whole thing. Let's see what this does. It's JSON. It's a dictionary, so it might just say dict or something like that, but it might give me the answer. So when you're using some machine learning model like this one, it generally comes back with some sort of confidence score. So it is, right? So in this case, it is pretty sure, 0.944, which is a pretty high confidence that it's a dog. It is less sure about it being a puppy or a lab retriever dog. But anyways, this is interesting, right? So this is using the visual recognition service on IBM Cloud. So quick question for people following or doing this. Were you able to finish this exercise? Or are you doing this right now? Okay, Pratik finished. So by the way, again, I could have done this from CLI, but I just wanted to show you the web interface as well. you can also come in here and add in a parameter here, which is different from invoking with a parameter. Invoking with a parameter means every time you call this function, you have to pass that parameter in. Okay. Instead, what I can do is I can take this API key and I can bind it to my function. And what that does is it sort of glues it to that function forever. So if I go to parameter, add a parameter, and I'll call okay. So I'll call this API key and then give it that value and save it. Now this is sort of glued to that function. So now if I, in invoke parameter, just give it an image URL, and I say invoke, then it should come back still with the right stuff. My functions are taking a long time to run today. Oh, something failed. API key. Oh, that's interesting. I wonder, I think maybe it doesn't need the codes. So let's go back to code and invoke it one more time. So Pratik, you're getting provided API key could not be found. Make sure you have the quotes on the value. I think the value may be fine. Let's see. Image URL is error image URL. Thank you, Conrad. I didn't think so. Let's see if this works. Yeah, this thing came back, so it's fine now. So the API key codes I had to remove, but the value needed the codes, which kind of makes sense, right? Because this can have spaces inside. The key won't, but if I was passing in another parameter, it could have a space. What's the difference between putting your API key in the parameter menu item on the left versus hard coding in your function? So yeah, I could have taken this, right? So I could have taken this whole thing, and inside my code, instead of doing this, I can just do this. I think that's what you're asking. So in general, this is not a good practice, right? So if I, in my case, now everybody knows my key, because if I put this somewhere on GitHub or share it with other people, first of all, it's insecure, or it's not very secure to put your key in hard coded. The second thing is, like, what if I want to change this key, or what if this key changes? Now I have to come inside the code and change it every time, versus if I have it like this, right? So now if I just go to the params and change the parameter. So those two things, it's the best practice and also more secure to put it outside as a parameter. By the way, these parameters are not available or not visible to the end user. They will never be able to see it. As a developer, of course, you log into the system so you can see the parameters here. Right, this is the other thing I should mention. The values are overwritten by the arguments providing in the invocation request. So if I bind this parameter to this function, but in my code, if I also provide it here, and this will not work, right? Because this is not the API key, then my code API key, or the parameter, overwrites the the invocation parameter overwrites the parameters on the left. So it should fail. Anyways, yeah, so API key could not be found, right? Because this thing doesn't exist. So let me delete that. And if I invoke it now, it should work. Oops. Why doesn't it work? There is something wrong with this little dialog thing. Sometimes it doesn't save properly. Huh. API key could not be found, but it's here. That is interesting. Let's go back here. Did I change anything else? Perhaps. Oh, yeah. Crap. I had extra codes. So now it should be okay. Okay. And that little dialogue thing is seems a little bit buggy sometimes. I will let the product team know so we can work on it. All right, so now it's here. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, worked. For CLI, we need to upgrade. Okay, Pratik, thank you for letting us know. Esteban is saying I have joined a little late, but curious if you talked about using recap services in Cloud Functions. Not yet, but we did talk about binding properties to your functions, so it's a similar concept. One more question: actions cannot be renamed. Not here. Actions, like in the UI, you cannot rename. I didn't think you could. Let me go. Maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, I'm not able to rename it here. So what I would do is just create a new action and delete this one. With the CLI, if I go, I would use this. I would just use the update command and then give it a new function name here. So now your function is called this, and then I would just action delete hello world CFE. From what I know, you cannot rename actions. But if somebody else knows otherwise, please let us know. In OpenWhisk at least. But it's easy enough to create a new one, delete the old one. Okay, that would be a workaround. So that was our exercise number 2. And then I will, since we have 15 minutes left, I'll just go back to the presentation and finish the last couple of slides. If you're interested, there is also a number 3, which has you create. Can you share secure webhook? Yes, if you mean the web action, yes. Once you create an action to a web action, there are 2 ways to do it. So the first one I showed was using this one. So you can pass in an API key. So if I do that, right. So if I say dash web true and this, now this function, which by the way I recreated, the update command will create the function if it's not already there, and I secured it with this very not secure key, and now I can do action get, and then dash URL. Now this URL needs my key in order to access it, but it's public, so yes, you can share that. The second thing is using the API gateway. So actually, let me show you that real quick. So we created this function called CFE image recognition. It is working, right? So let's just make sure it's working because we made a couple of changes. Oh, it is not working. Yeah, this is this webinar is being recorded, which is very good because I can take this to our product team and tell them I'm not going crazy. This is a little bit of a glitch that we have to work out. But let's see. Okay, so this is working. So let's put this behind an API gateway. So I could do that in the CLI, but also another way to do that is to go to this APIs menu on the left. And I'm now able to create an API, and I'm going to call it. I can create it from scratch, or I can import a Swagger file. But in this case, let's call this CFE API. It's created a base path for me, which is great. And now I can create an operation, which is classify. So if anybody comes to /classify and gives me a GET request, then call the CFE image recognition action and expect or return back JSON. So I'll create that. And here I can do a little bit more security, right? I can add a little bit more security. I can add authentication here. For now, I'll just leave it as it is. I can also do rate limiting, so how many calls are made per minute, I can limit that. And I can also add OAuth based authentication. I want to enable the cross-origin stuff, and I think that's it. So I can just create this API gateway or an endpoint using this API gateway. Okay, so here's my API. It gives me some analysis of what's happened so far. Of course, I haven't called this yet, but I can now go to sharing and keys, and this is where I can add more keys to it, but I'm not going to do that. But here's my endpoint, right? It created this endpoint for me. So let's try it out. Who knows curl syntax? Okay, so curl, just give it that. And then let's just pass in, I was going to pass in the URL here, but then I have to encode it. That's the only thing. Let's see if I can do it here. So if I call it just here, question mark with the dog picture, let's give it a different one. Let's give it this one. Let's see if this is going to work. Image URL is this. Okay. Yeah, I think I have to encode this last bit, and then it would have worked. And I am not entirely sure how to do that right now. Oh, you think that was it? Let's see. No, that wasn't it. It's something else, which I'm not entirely sure how to do this. Oh, okay. Well, if you try enough number of times, I guess it comes back. All right. So here's now our function is behind it's still not secure because I didn't add any authentication to the API gateway, but now I could have, now you can, this is one way of doing the security thing is using the API gateway. Okay, going back to my exercises now, there's a lab 3, and lab 3 has you create a sequence, I believe. So you can try that on your own. If you want to dive into a little bit more intermediate workshop, then like I said, there are 7 different exercises here. This is an interesting one using NPM modules. So the question is, sometimes you ask us, what do you do if the built-in runtime does not give you the NPM package, for example, in Node.js that you want to use? So, for example, we use the IBM Cloud or Watson SDK, which is provided in all the runtimes. But if I want to use something like, so in this case, they're showing an example with left pad. But let's say if you want to use lorem ipsum or something like that, then the way to do that is to create your function in this way, do an npm install locally, and then zip up everything into a zip file and push that zip file to IBM Cloud using the action create. Because it's a zip file, now you have to specify the kind that you want to use. In this case, it's using the default Node.js runtime, which is 10. But if this was a Python zip file, you just use --kind Python. So that's another way to do it. And it's one of the exercises here is to be able to do that. It also goes through the concept of triggers, APIs, which we looked at right now, and then web functions. So this is a set of exercises if you are interested to dive a little bit deeper. I'll go back to my slides and finish off real quick before handing it back to Brian. 2 things I want to mention. One is something called IBM Code Patterns. So if you go to developer.ibm.com/patterns, these are open source repositories that developers at IBM have created for your learning, I guess is one way to put it. Wait for this to come up. My internet is not very fast today. Okay, I'm not going to wait for that to come up, but essentially it looks like this. So these are different examples in machine learning. So if you want to learn a little bit more about, let's say, speech-to-text model, or Pratik is saying site is slow. Yes, it is slow today. So there is a different section for serverless, and there are a whole bunch of patterns you can use in serverless. So that's one. And the other thing I want to tell you real quick is we are running this competition or hackathon called Call for Code. And my internet is really slow. But Call for Code is a, let me go here. I know I have a slide here on Call for Code, so I'm just going to show that. Okay, so Call for Code is our annual competition, and the winner gets $200. The winner gets $200,000 cash prize. And we are running two different themes this time. There's a shorter theme, or a short contest on COVID-19, how you can use technology to help our first responders, our medical people, our communities, people who are affected by this pandemic. And then the longer competition is on climate change. And again, how can you use technology to make a difference in this field? So here are some deadlines. You can go to this website and sign up. It's, again, free to sign up, but it's an interesting interesting time for us as developers to be able to do something and help out. Okay, so those are the two things I wanted to show everybody. And then I think I'm pretty much done. Hopefully everybody at least got the Hello World working. If not, the second example, if you get time, please go through the second one. And then the extended workshop. There, we didn't go through this concept of composition, but you can create higher level functions or actions from other actions. And this is showing a way to do that. And essentially what that looks like would be something like this, where this flowchart based on certain conditions creates other actions. And this whole thing is now composition. There is an open source tool called Kui that that you can use to visualize your actions. So if if you want to look at that, and I think I am done. This is one last thing on some things to keep in mind, right? So we talked about functions being stateless. Your responsibility as developers to persist stage. When you look at these platforms, you have to make sure you look at, are you able to test and develop locally? How does version control work? How does the API gateway work? Latency is a problem with latency, or cold starts is a problem with serverless, so something to keep in mind.
Thanks for watching.